Hello, my name is Patti Rundall and I'm from Baby Milk Action, which is the UK member of the International Baby Food Action Network. I'm going to talk to you about monitoring and why it's so important and for public health. IBFAN monitors the International Code of Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes. This was the first consumer protection tool of its kind, and it was adopted in 1981 with 118 countries in favour and just one against the United States. The code was set up to try and stop the harmful marketing of baby foods that were causing so much harm to children. IBFAN is an action-oriented independent network. That means we don't take money from corporations, or we go to a lot of trouble to make sure that any of our funders are not linked in any way to the baby food industry. So we take conflicts of interest very, very seriously, and that's why we're very broke. But still, we are very active, and still we have 273 groups in over 168 countries. And now, we've just had our 40th anniversary, so we're one of the longest surviving single-issue groups around, I think. IBFAN participated in the drafting of the code, and our monitoring evidence, really helped show what was needed in that code at the very outset. Since 1981, there have been 19 resolutions because member states have to come back and report on their progress in the code every 2 years. This is really, really important. And when they come back, we and others inform them of what's going on in the marketplace. The code evolves almost like the code evolves like a virus, and you need to have new strategies to actually deal with what's happening and what the new products are, what the new strategies are. So these are very important, these resolutions, and they must be read together with the code, and they have equal status, and they must be implemented together. That's incredibly important. Important also to know that the code protects against predatory marketing. It's actually not about breastfeeding, nor it's about marketing. It doesn't stop the sale of products. It doesn't put pressure on women to breastfeed against their will. Its aim is to ensure the protection from misleading and predatory marketing. And to give sound, objective, independent information to mothers and babies and parents and families and carers, anybody who's looking after infant and young child feeding. The code is needed because we have a baby food industry. Now, the commercialization of artificial feeding started when Nestlé, the big Swiss giant, created a substitute for mother's milk in 1867. Since that time, this Swiss food giant has dominated the global baby food marketing. Now a newcomer, Danone, has closely followed. Now, don't think that the whole thing is over. It isn't. The baby food drink market is estimated to grow from $68 billion in 2020 to $91.5 billion by 2026. So we're talking about more than 30% in 5 years growth. How this happened? How did the companies do this? Well, they've always known that sponsorship generates goodwill and trust. This is a sensitive subject, how mothers feed their babies. And here we have a picture of Nestlé milk nurses, sales reps dressed up as nurses. Now, these are being trusted to run infant feeding classes in a hospital in South Africa. And this is not the only type of thing. In the 80s, Abbott Ross paid for architectural services, and that facilitated the separation of mothers and babies. This is how bad practice is: separation, time fees, routine topping up, test weighing, all these things that we know are harmful to breastfeeding, how they've been exported all over the world. Of course, it's mothers, babies, and countries that pick up the costs, healthcare systems. Breastfeeding is a cornerstone in child survival. It reduces under 5 mortality by 13%. In 1981, 1.5, when I started to know about this issue, 1.5 million babies died each year because they were not breastfed. Today, breastfeeding saves 820,000 babies each year because some of the controls that we've helped bring in are reducing the numbers steadily, but there's still far too many. Millions more don't reach their potential. The economic and environmental costs of artificial feeding, unnecessary artificial feeding that is, are substantial as well. The code came about mainly because of people power and the Nestle boycott. In 1939, a pediatrician called Dr. Cecily Williams had noticed that the Nestle was promoting sweetened condensed milk in Singapore, and she did an amazing speech exposing and calling misleading propaganda about infant feeding should be punished as the most criminal form of sedition, and that these deaths should be regarded as murder. Derek Jellick in '68 came through with coining the term commerciogenic malnutrition, the idea that babies or humans could actually die or become ill because of marketing. It wasn't until 1974 that Warren Want's Baby Killer was translated into German, and that ended up in a lawsuit. So Nestle won that lawsuit because they could not stand having Nestle kills babies. So, but the costs, they were ordered to pay costs and were widely criticised. The Nestle boycott was launched in 1977, and we in the UK joined in 1981. But important was the Kennedy hearings. Senator Edward Kennedy held these hearings because of evidence, again, monitoring evidence that he was given by various groups in America. And despite very powerful testimonies and clear evidence of the harm caused by marketing, the companies refused to stop. It's well worth watching this video of the hearings. This prompted Senator Edward Kennedy to propose an international code and the US government to set up a scientific committee of inquiries. So NGO action was and still is essential. In fact, Hafton Mahler, the DG at the time of the code, said this: without the NGOs, without their constant lobbying, reminding us of our duty as public health officers, even harassing us for months on end, without all that, there would never have been a code. WHO would simply not have had the courage to get on with it. In fact, the tobacco industry was waiting in the wings, and they said the infant formula experience had put back the multinational cause by 8 to 10 years, because this was quite a new and dramatic thing for WHO to do, to take on corporations. Up till then, they'd been doing things, communicable diseases and smallpox and other things. The code is very importantly underpinned by human rights instruments. In 1990, the Convention on the Rights of the Child was ratified, and breastfeeding was enshrined as a legal right of the child, and contributing to the fulfillment of its right to the highest attainable standard of health. This is really important because it means that states then have a duty to protect those rights, and corporates have a duty to respect them. Other human HR instruments sought to remove obstacles to breastfeeding and maternity protection and things like that to make it easy to do that. The US had a particular and persistent problem in that they see corporations as almost like it's the corporate personhood legal concept in the US. And it's used to argue that attempts to restrict company activity is an infringement of those rights, taking away life, liberty, and property. In fact, in other parts of the world, corporates do not have human rights, they just steal them. The companies responded with CSR. Corporations developed counter strategies aiming to be seen as socially responsible and willing to self-regulate through voluntary codes. Their aim has always been to convince governments that there was no need for more international codes, regulations, or conventions. Here's Nestlé reassuring its shareholders that tying the corporations up in regulatory straitjackets is unnecessary when companies such as Nestlé already have sound principles and core values. They don't say that self-regulation only works as long as companies want it to, and that it doesn't reduce the extent and impact of marketing. In fact, the volume can increase. It also undermines governments' resolve to legislate. The companies use the tobacco playbook, and so I'm sure that the alcohol industries as well will use the tobacco playbook, hijacking, manipulating the political and legislative process, exaggerating their importance, manipulating public opinion, using front groups, discrediting science, intimidating governments. I'm sure this is common to all of them. And, you know, the baby food industry was not alone in fighting a rearguard action against regulation on a country-by-country basis, knowing full well that where you have a strong law, as you'll see with the India graph here, where there's no growth in the sale of the products, whereas in China you've got massive growth where the law is not implemented. Just quickly on to monitoring. IPFAN has been lucky to have an International Code Documentation Centre in Penang that produced IPFAN's global monitoring reports and charts grading companies and countries. And ICDC ran 60 courses training 2,000 government officials. 67 countries have since based laws on ICD's model law. Here are pictures of some of the charts and the number of companies there. You'll see it's not just Nestlé, it's many other companies, and the press coverage. And here's some reports more recently. And WHO and UNICEF and IPFAN jointly do a report for the last 6 years, I think it is. We've done reports together on the status of where countries are. And the last one says that 70% of countries have laws based on the code, although most are far from strong enough. 44 countries have strengthened their regulations in the past 2 years. 8 WHO resolutions tackle conflicts of interest. This is really important. The first in 1996 was urged member states to ensure that financial support for professionals working in infant and young child health does not create conflicts of interest. Also, very importantly, that monitoring the application of the International Code and subsequent resolutions is carried out in a transparent, independent manner, free from commercial influence. You can use these resolutions, and we have, to improve transparency in EU science and to get scientists to declare their interests, and also to create networks with health professionals and others. And here's a film I want to put in, because this film, Tigers, is a movie film, but actually it's all about a Pakistani whistleblower exposing the conflicts of interest in the medical profession. This is another way of monitoring and actually making sure that we hold people accountable. The Codex Alimentarius is another forum that I want to just touch on. This is where rich exporting countries dominate Codex, and where the African countries and the poorer states have hardly any voice. we'll have a meeting later on tonight about labelling, and you'll see that it's really sidelined in favour of the US and the EU and the big exporting countries. It's a real problem. Unless Codex, it's geared up to prioritize trade of ultra-processed food over health, and hardly any mention of planetary health, except that they're now saying, let's have sustainability claims. So I'm dreading to think what that will be. The code in climate crisis, code protects breastfeeding, and which is the most sustainable, environmentally friendly way to feed baby. And we know that the greenhouse gases, 21 to 37% of total greenhouse gases are from the food system. So green lighting ultra-processed foods is really going to make things worse. This slide is about sunsetting of the code. There have been moves within WHO to take the code off the agenda as the industry wants. We fought against this, and actually there was a petition with 11,000 signatures, which was marvellous, saying, no, don't do that. We need to keep going. We need to keep watch on commercial promotion, and member states need to be able to come to the Assembly and say what's bothering things in their countries, what's undermining health. We need those resolutions very much. This reporting is embedded in the code and in the WHO constitution. This is really important to remember, and we're using it to fight that must not be, the code reporting mustn't be sunsetted. So I'm finally going to come to, we need to watch our language. We must avoid the term stakeholder. It's creeping in everywhere. NGOs should not have any business agenda or stake in the matter at hand. So I always feel when I see stakeholder, I'm not welcome here, because I'm just here for public health. I'm not going to make money out of this. Of course, some NGOs are making money out of it, and that's another problem. When you have if you have corporate funding, or as if there's pressure on you to take certain positions, this does present a big problem. Partnerships is another word that we must watch, which is, by definition, they're arrangements for shared governments to achieve shared goals. Shared decision-making is their single most unifying feature. Respect, trust, these are wonderful words that the companies love to have applied to them. Interactions, financing, these are much better words. And remember that the image transfer from the UN and NGO partners has strong emotional and financial value. We were just very concerned in 1927, a Gates-funded Meridian Institute proposed a multi-stakeholder monitoring, the global monitoring mechanism with industry. This, if you see, it looks identical to WHO. In fact, it isn't. It's totally different. And this was abandoned after IPFAN created a note of dissent. An equally worrying idea is happening now with breast milk substitutes call to action, which again I hope will be abandoned. And that uses commercially influenced access to nutrition index. Again, IPFAN is opposed to this. We don't feel that monitoring and the resolution, the 4915 actually says you must not do this. You must have independent monitoring. Another threat that we find tricky is the Scaling Up Nutrition and the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. Both these are in our area, looking at child health, looking at infant and young child health, and they're advocating close collaboration with corporations. And they both have very poor conflict of interest safeguards and accountability procedures. I think they're missing completely. So the key messages I want to say are the WHO must keep the code and marketing controls on its agenda. Health policy must be transparent and free from commercial influence, as must monitoring. They must have effective regulations that need a delegated authority and good implementing rules. Governments are duty bearers, and they must protect human rights and planetary health. that is inseparable from human health. So support whistleblowers to ask to show the film Tigers. Thank you very much. I hope that gives a little snatch of what we're about. Thank you very much.